This is the story of Hans-Joachim Marseille, one of the most renowned fighter pilots in history. The remarkable accomplishments of German pilots during World War II sharply contrasted with the inept leadership of their Luftwaffe commanders, particularly Hermann Göring. Exceptional pilots were active in every theatre of the war, including the African campaign. Alongside the incredible achievements of Hans-Joachim Marseille, known as the Star of Africa, we must also recognise the quiet heroism of many of his comrades. The German fighter pilot was a noble soldier who fulfilled his duty with courage, embodying the finest aspects of military tradition. Franz Els, a retired ambassador, was formerly a pilot with Fighter Squadron 27. This is the memory of a time which, to a great extent, shaped my youth, and which has also greatly influenced my whole way of thinking since then, to the point where I would do anything and everything to avoid a future war and to prevent the sort of suffering we endured in the desert, sometimes under extremely hard climactic and general living conditions. The battle under the scorching sun of Africa was a strategically crucial aspect of aerial warfare. Disrupting enemy troop movements and destroying their supply routes were the primary objectives of the aerial strategy. To achieve this successfully, gaining aerial supremacy in the African theatre of war was essential for both sides. In numerous engagements, the fighters primarily shouldered the main burden of the air battles over the desert. Beating their wings, our fighters returned from their successful encounter. Hauptmann Uben, holder of the Knight's Cross with bar. Up till now, he has shot down 101. Major Munchberg, who has the Knight's Cross with swords, has killed 4 British in this air battle alone. Up till now, he has shot down a total of 125 planes. Feldmarschall Kesselring. In the centre, Hauptmann Bahr. He was able to shoot down 5 Tommies today and has been the victor in 152 air battles. The burning wrecks of the planes lie over a wide area of the desert. In this battle of man against man, a remarkable spirit of chivalry emerged, rooted in comradeship and respect for enemy pilots. There were no terror attacks on cities, nor were defenseless civilians strafed by the fighters. The focus was solely on engaging military targets. Against the RAF Spitfire, Hurricane, Curtiss Tomahawk, and from 1942 onward, the improved Kitty Hawk, the Luftwaffe deployed its most powerful fighter, the Me-109, while the Italians used a Fiat CR-42. Amid these clashes, a young German fighter pilot soared across the African sky like a comet, setting new, unsurpassed standards in aerial warfare. On April 22, 1941, 22-year-old Hans-Joachim Marseille was transferred to North Africa with the 1st Group Fighter Squadron 27 to support the Afrika Korps. The very next day, April 23rd, he won his first air battle in Africa by shooting down a Hurricane. Thus began the most remarkable series of successes in the history of fighter pilots. The brilliant aeronautical skills of this young pilot officer enabled him to break all previous records and set new ones that remain unmatched even today. Oberst Galland, Chief of Staff of the fighters, visits an airstrip in the desert. A signpost in the desert. the Staffel-Kapitans tent. Back from a successful hunt. In this action, the squadron gained its 1000th air victory. The victorious fighter pilot is fated. Oberstleutnant Marseille, who has the oak leaves, has shot down 87 of the enemy so far. One of the most outstanding fighter pilots in North Africa, Hans Arnold Stahl-Schmidt, a close friend of Marseille, wrote home in a forces letter, "Marseille can shoot like a young god." Above all, he can do what only a few can do, and that is to shoot confidently in a curve. Friedrich Körner, pilot with Fighter Squadron 27. Hans-Joachim Marseille was probably one of the very few fighter pilots who mastered 100% the art of shooting in a curve. Most of the planes Hans-Joachim Marseille brought down, almost 100%, were shot in a curve. It's a special technique and a special tactic which you really have to master if you want to succeed. Emil Kladd, also a pilot with Fighter Squadron 27. Marseille combined many qualities which are important in a fighter pilot. Firstly, he had very good sight, and in the air, three-dimensional vision is very important. You need to be able to look into the depths of space in order to recognize the enemy as soon as possible. Then you have a decisive advantage. You can position yourself in the most favorable place for an attack, and maybe you can even carry out a surprise attack, which puts you at a great advantage. Secondly, Marseille developed his own special tactics for shooting down a plane, which differed significantly from the methods of most of the other fighter pilots. When we attacked, we always attached great importance to flying at high speed, so that we could escape from a precarious situation if necessary. Of course, Marseille too flew at high speed. But besides that, he did something extraordinary. In Africa, it frequently happened that the enemy formed a defense circle. That means when 5, 6 or 7 planes fly in a circle, the one behind could cover the one in front. So there was practically no one without cover. Marseille flew into this defensive circle. And in fact, nobody else ever copied this tactic, because when he entered from on top, he only had a very short time to shoot. But many times he dived through and attacked the defensive circle from below, and by using this tactic, he had to fly very slowly. He even took it to the point where he had to operate his landing flaps so as not to fall down, because of course he had to fly his curve more tightly than the upper defense circle. Shooting in a curve is the most difficult thing a fighter pilot can do. That means that the enemy flies a defense circle. It means they're already lying in a curve, and the attacking fighter has to fly into this defense circle. By pulling his plane right round, his curve radius must be smaller, but if he does that, his target disappears, in most cases, below his wings. So he can't see it anymore and has to proceed simply by instinct. He already has to shoot without being able to see the target. You have to calculate this interval between your own fire and the presumed hit of the bullets on the enemy plane. You have to guess, to sense it, and of course, to score a hit. Hans-Joachim Marseille was not only an excellent marksman, but also an outstanding pilot. He embodied the most important characteristics of the ideal fighter pilot. Whenever the Gelb 14 appeared in the African sky, it signalled significant losses for his British adversaries. This is evident from the following chronological list of his air victories. He and his plane were one unit, and he was in command of that plane like nobody else. Fritz Keller, pilot with Fighter Squadron 27. Well, he didn't stand out that much in the France-England action. His great time started in Africa. He developed his own unique tactics, and he was lucky in having such good sight and such incredible speed of reaction. He was so familiar with the machine, and he controlled the machine like no one else. Edouard Edo Neumann, Marseille's wing leader. Marseille wasn't robust, he was the exact opposite, somehow gentle. His blood vessels shone through his skin, and I was always amazed by the strength he had when he flew in an air fight. You have to have a lot of strength to fly in curves and to pull the plane through. He always flew at very, very high speed. You could see the white eddies at the end of the wings. You recognize him immediately in flight. That's Marseille. He understood and reacted at the speed of lightning. He had an incredible eye. I want to say he seemed able to divide the air into slices. We others sometimes looked through the enemy and looked at the other side and didn't see what was in front of us. He was a talented pilot, extraordinarily talented, a unique talent. Jochen, as his friends called him, was highly decorated for his extraordinary achievements. He received the Iron Cross, second and first class, in September 1940. On November 3, 1941, he was awarded the Honor Goblet of the Luftwaffe. On December 1, 1941, after achieving 33 air victories, he became the first pilot in Africa to be awarded the German Cross in gold. On February 22, 1942, Adolf Hitler decorated him with the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. On June 6, 1942, with 75 air victories, he became the 98th soldier of the Wehrmacht to receive the oak leaves to his Knight's Cross. Just 14 days later, on June 18th of the same year, he was again decorated by his Führer Adolf Hitler with the swords to his Knight's Cross and oak leaves. He was only the 12th soldier in the Wehrmacht to receive this honor. Only 2 months later, on August 6, 1942, Hans-Joachim Marseille received the highest Italian medal for bravery, the Medaglia d'Oro. And again, just 4 weeks later, on September 4, 1942, in addition to the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross with oak leaves and swords, he was awarded the Diamonds. This came after his 126th air victory, making him only the 4th member of the German Wehrmacht to be so honored. The magnificent series of successes by Hans-Joachim Marseille, now known as the Star of Africa, swiftly turned him into a national hero all over Germany. To speak of Jochen solely as a phenomenally successful fighter pilot does not fully capture the essence of the man. He was born in Berlin, Charlottenburg, on December 13, 1919, into a family with a tradition of flying. His father, Siegfried Marseille, had already flown in World War I and later served as a major general in the army until he was killed in action on the Eastern Front. Young Marseille was fascinated by airplanes from a young age, and his flying training began on November 7, 1938. His easygoing nature led to clashes with the formality and discipline of military life. Marseille the individualist was soon reprimanded for unauthorized aerobatics and low-flying stunts. On September 6, 1940, he was transferred to the 1st Group of Fighter Squadron 2 in France. There, he caught the attention of his superiors, initially due to his youthful antics. He was an easygoing young NCO, enamored with life, opposed to all forms of discipline, and with a magnetic attraction to the opposite sex. During a few engagements on the Channel coast, Marseille achieved his first 7 air victories, all against Spitfires, but he himself was shot down 4 times, resulting in a less than impressive success rate. However, Eduard Neumann, who would later become his wing leader, recognized Marseille's extraordinary talent and knew how to guide the young eagle onto the right path. He didn't press Marseille, fully aware that the idea of teamwork held little sway over this young man. Thus, Edu Neumann became the pivotal figure behind the scenes, laying the groundwork for the Star of Africa. The first group of Fighter Squadron 27 is cleared for takeoff. Enemy fighters are inbound. The Me-109s are started up. The pilots make their final preparations for takeoff. He was an exceptionally kind man, very friendly and solicitous, towards subordinates as well, towards the ordinary soldiers in the army. Whenever they needed help, he helped them. That was his most striking characteristic. Hans-Joachim Marseille was a young daredevil, and what was especially impressive was that with all the success he achieved, he remained a kind and friendly comrade. Like no other young soldier of the war generation, Hans-Joachim personified the symbol of German youth of his time with his generous and friendly demeanour. Jochen, who inspired both respect and affection in his comrades, likely captured everyone's heart due to his unorthodox behaviour. I couldn't imagine a better relationship between superior and subordinate. I never had any discipline difficulties with Marseille. I couldn't imagine a better relationship between superior and subordinate. I never had any discipline difficulties with Marseille. He behaved in a very orderly fashion, a very military way, and he never drew attention to the fact that he was the famous Eagle. So, whenever I had problems which bothered me, I took the car and drove over to Marseille's tent. There was a sofa made out of sandbags, filled with sand and covered with horse blankets. Ein Sofa gab es aus Sandsäcken gefüllt mit Sand und abgedeckt mit Pferdedecken. So I used to sit down there and flip through the old newspapers, which I'd already read, and in this way I let the atmosphere of the Marseille squadron wash over me. As the war progressed, the enemy's material superiority constantly grew. Due to immense supply difficulties, the only way the Luftwaffe could respond was by increasing the number of sorties flown by their pilots. However, this continual pressure took its toll and gradually wore down the crews. On the afternoon of December 26, 1942, Hauptmann Marseille's Gelb 14 took off for the second time that day. Despite already destroying 3 Spitfires in the morning, he achieved another 3 air victories, once again against Spitfires. His 158th and final air victory was also his most challenging. The enemy pilot proved to be almost his equal. A tough struggle begins in the air. Every second counts in the decision of life or death. Finally, in a moment of inattention on the part of his adversary, Hauptmann Marseille manages to maneuver behind the enemy. Under the burst of fire from the Gelb 14, the 158th enemy plane plummets from the sky. But this time, as he approaches to land at the squadron airfield, there's no triumphant beat of his wings. Pale, his face pallid and drawn, he climbs out of his plane and with trembling hands reaches for a cigarette. Acknowledging his masterly opponent at the subsequent flight meeting, Marseille pays tribute to the skill of his adversary. Marseille was a legend for all of us, Germans and Italians alike. He was so successful. And we were grateful for somebody like Marseille, who was able somehow to lift some of the pressure which the flying exercised on us.
Im Falle Marseille zum Beispiel, indem den Druck minderte, der aus der Luft ausgeübt worden war.
You see, the material superiority of the enemy was so enormous at that time.
Unwahrscheinlich stark, ne? Also schon allein aus Dankbarkeit, nicht, war das Verhältnis also gut.
It's the 30th of September 1942. The desert is bathed in an eerie, pale light as the fateful day begins to dawn. Once again, as he's done on countless times in the past weeks and months, Hans-Joachim Marseille steps out onto the runway. At 10:47, he takes off with 8 other planes of his squadron to escort a Stuka unit. From the squadron command post, wing leader Neumann directs the squadron via radio towards a British fighter unit. As the German Messerschmitt fighters approach, the enemy veers northward, avoiding an air fight. The German fighters are already en route back when, at 11:30, news of an engine on fire reaches Major Neumann. I was at the command post myself and listening to the radio communication between the pilots of the No. 3 Squadron. I realized immediately that something serious had happened. I knew while they were still in flight that they were trying to bring Marseille over the lines into our territory while his plane was emitting a lot of smoke. And when it finally got to the point where they told him, "All right, you can get out now," he presumably turned the plane over onto its back, but with the engine at a sharp downward inclination. As he got out, he fell against the tail unit, and the whole of his groin area on one side was torn open. We always assumed that this was what caused his death, or if not, that he was unconscious and not even able to make an attempt to open his parachute. At the time of the first announcement of the engine on fire, the first squadron was flying in formation at an altitude of approximately 3,000 meters. The flying time to their own lines was still approximately 5 minutes, covering about 40 kilometers, when a pall of white smoke from the engine port of Marseille's plane began to intensify. At 11:35 am, the unit flies over Sidi Abel Rahman and thus reaches the German lines. Hans-Joachim Marseille's question over the radio, "Are we already over our own lines? I can't see anything," clearly indicates that he'd already lost visibility due to the blanket of smoke surrounding him. Now the flames from the engine also become visible. After Marseille had thrown off the cockpit roof, he turned the plane onto its back with a half roll and prepared to bail out. After losing an altitude of about 2,000 to 3,000 meters, he unfastened his seatbelt. Due to poor visibility, he may not have realized that the Me-109 had already transitioned from an inverted position into a nosedive. Therefore, it's possible that he was struck by the tail unit when he exited the plane on the left-hand side, rendering him unconscious. Unable to pull the release to open the parachute, he was left helpless. In shock and disbelief, his comrades watched the tragedy unfold from their planes. Then, at 11:36, a broken voice came over the radio. "He's dead." Morale was so low that we needed a personality, someone like Oberstleutnant Franziskert, and it was he, incidentally, who recovered the body from the desert.
Hat ihn übrigens den Leichnam, also mit Fritze Dettmann gebracht aus der Wüste. Fuhr mal am Abend.
In the evening, he drove into the camp and gave the order to play the Rumba Asol record. It was Marseille's favorite record.
Die Lieblingsplatte von Marseille. Ne? Und das war psychologisch richtig, was der Franziska da gemacht hat.
Psychologically speaking, he did the right thing. You pulled yourself together, you covered up your worries and your anger and your fear.
Und man ist ja jung und hoffnungsfreudig, also man wird.
You were young after all, and you could handle the problem. But there was no getting away from the fact that Marseille was the last great eagle of the squadron that was utterly exhausted and really in no condition to put in more service on the front. An inquiry was promptly initiated to investigate the cause of the crash and reached the following conclusions. Damage to the differential gear on the brand new Me 109 resulted in oil leakage. Subsequently, due to some teeth breaking off the spur wheel, the leaked oil ignited. The nearly vertical descent from an altitude of almost 3,000 meters led to the complete destruction of the engine. The report submitted by the Commission under reference 52, number 27042, concluded with the statement that sabotage or human error was ruled out. The burial service took place in the cemetery at Derna, a dignified but at the same time simple affair under the conditions of war. Feldmarschall Kessering spoke first, and then it was my turn.
Es sprach aber selbst der Feldmarschall Kessering, nach ihm habe ich gesprochen.
The simple inscription on the gravestone reads, Hauptmann Hans-Joachim Marseille, born on December 13, 1919, killed on September 30, 1942, at southern city Abel Raman, No. 1 Group of the Fighter Squadron 27. Matthias von Transvaal, Marseille's Batman and close friend, laid a chain of 158 muscle shells, one for each air victory, on the coffin. The final resting place for the Star of Africa was the memorial grave at Tobruk, where he was later reburied. 10 Italian soldiers from a pioneer unit, along with a few German comrades, erected a memorial pyramid on the crash site with the inscription, Here died Hauptmann Hans-Joachim Marseille, undefeated. Due to war shortages, the building materials used in the construction of the pyramid were of poor quality. Bit by bit, pieces broke off until it finally crumbled and fell down. 47 years later, the new Marseille Pyramid was inaugurated on the same site by his former comrades from Fighter Squadron 27 and their Italian comrades. In 3 languages, German, Italian and Arabic, it tells the visitor, Here died undefeated, Hans-Joachim Marseille, September 30th, 1942. At the 49th commemoration, Anton Weiler spoke. The fact that we're here today to consecrate this rebuilt pyramid is thanks to Edu Neumann. He gave utterance to the thought many years ago, and he showed an exemplary commitment and a passionate enthusiasm for this plan. He's undoubtedly the one here in this assembled circle who most deserves to be filled with pleasure, satisfaction and pride that the work is now complete. He gave his thoughts and plans unselfishly to the community of fighter pilots because he wanted this memorial to be rebuilt, to stand as well for all who did their duty in this theatre of war, in the loneliness of the desert and under the difficult climatic conditions. As we come together here, far away from our native country, to remember Hans-Joachim Marseille and all those who lost their lives, pilots and ground staff, it's important to state that this has nothing to do with hero worship. What we're feeling at this moment is nothing more than a part realization of a promise, which we made at that time, not to forget those killed or missing in the war. Nevertheless, this memorial also makes us conscious of the fact that it is our duty to remark that the German soldier did his duty with honor and courage. And in this sense, I feel at this moment an inner empathy. For me, this time, this hour, is a symbol of our human culture, which we cherished and which was and always will be the center of our community.
Für mich ist dieser Augenblick, diese Stunde hier, ein Zeichen.
And now I think we should remember, with a minute's silence, the ones who lost their lives here.
Im Mittelpunkt unserer Gemeinschaft gestanden hat und immer stehen wird. Und ich würde meinen, wir sollten in einer Denkminute uns jetzt an jene erinnern, die hier ihr Leben gelassen haben.
When Richthofen was killed in World War I, they said, the front stopped breathing. And this is what you had to say too after the death of Hans-Joachim Marseille.
Und das muss man erst recht sagen, bezieht sich erst recht auf.
It touched us all very deeply, incredibly deeply, no matter whether we were Army or Navy, Italian or German.
Gleich Heer, Marine, Italiener, Deutsche, nicht, hat uns alle gleichermaßen seelisch unwahrscheinlich bewegt, tief bewegt.
Order of the day, September the 30th, 1942. On September the 30th, 1942, Hauptmann Marseille met his end as a pilot, undefeated by the enemy. We are at a loss to comprehend that this young, joyful and brave fighter pilot of our squadron is no longer amongst us. Our triumphs over our toughest adversary, the English, stand as unparalleled. We can find solace and pride in the fact that he was one of us. Words fail to capture the magnitude of this loss. It is our duty to carry on his legacy, both as individuals and as soldiers. His spirit will forever serve as a guiding light for the squadron.
Aviation, the art of aeronautics, began with the dreamers, inventors and daredevils who dared to defy gravity. The journey of aviation was nurtured by pioneers like the Wright brothers, whose first flight marked a historic milestone. The role of aircrafts in world wars was groundbreaking, dramatically changing warfare strategies. This initiated a technological evolution in aviation, transforming the simplistic wings of a biplane into the thunderous roar of jet engines. Let's journey through the ages of aviation. Behind every great aircraft, there were great minds. These visionaries, like Sir Frank Whittle, the innovator of the turbojet engine, redefined air travel. Then there's Skunkworks Kelly Johnson, the genius behind the SR-71 Blackbird. His designs combined speed, stealth and power, crafting machines that dominated the heavens. The contributions of these pioneers have left an indelible mark on the canvas of aviation, shaping the course of history and inspiring generations of engineers and aviators. Each epoch in aviation history gave birth to extraordinary aircrafts, each with their own unique features and roles. The Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird was a marvel of speed and stealth. The F-105 Thunderchief, a supersonic fighter bomber, was vital in the Vietnam War. The P-51 Mustang, a long-range fighter, was critical in World War II. The P-47 Thunderbolt, a heavyweight fighter, was used extensively in the same war. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog, is a close air support icon. The Messerschmitt Me-262 marked a leap forward in aviation technology. Each of these game changers were instrumental in their eras, and their legacies still resonate today. Beyond the game changers, there are those that have transcended their practical roles to become icons. The Concorde was not just an aircraft, it was a supersonic symbol of luxury and speed. The B-52 Stratofortress, a strategic bomber, is an icon of power and resilience. These magnificent machines and others like them have become much more than just aircrafts. They are enduring icons that encapsulate the audacious spirit, the relentless innovation, and the boundless ambition that define the world of aviation. For more amazing aerial footage, and to join us in this incredible journey, check out the DroneScapes YouTube channel.
If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.